Now, I heard, and I saw just a little bit of it, but I heard that Mitt Romney made a fairly long speech. And I mean, honestly, I thought I'll just address it quickly because it's irrelevant. Look, Mitt is a failed candidate. He failed. He failed horribly. The third debate, he failed badly. That was a race, I have to say, folks, that should have been won. That was a race that absolutely should have been won. And I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared. He disappeared. And I wasn't happy about it, I'll be honest, because I am not a fan of Barack Obama, and that was a race. And I backed Mitt Romney. I backed him. You can see how loyal he is. He was begging for my endorsement. I could have said, Mitt, drop to your knees. He would have dropped to his knees. He was begging. Sure. He was begging me. And did you see how great? He said, oh, I'm not big like him. He's the great businessman, all that stuff. Well, since then, I've done much better. And now he tries to demean, but we'll talk about that in a second. But Mitt was thinking about running again. He ran a horrible campaign. It was a campaign that should have never been lost. You're running against a failed president. He came up with the 47%. He demeaned 47% of the people in our country, right? The famous 47%. Once that was said, I'll be honest, once that was said, a lot of people thought it was over for him. Then the last month and a half, he disappeared. And I called his people. I said, you have to do yourself a favor. Obama, say what you want. He was on Jay Leno. He was on David Letterman. He was all over the place the last 3-4 weeks. Mitt was looking for zoning for a 9-car garage or something in California, right? I said, what's he doing? Who cares about a garage? You're running for president. And Mitt was a disaster as a candidate. So what happened, and it was very strong, and I think if the press goes back, they'll see it. When I heard he was running again, and I wasn't sure I was going to be running, but I was very, very strong to Mitt and to everybody, and publicly, not to talk to him, because I didn't even want to talk to him. I was so disappointed in him, because he let us down. He let us down. You know, it's one thing you lose, and you work, and you work, and you go. He let us down. He should have won. Something happened to him. He went away. He was gone. He was horrible in the third debate. It was a horrible, something happened. I don't know what happened. Maybe someday they'll write a book. His campaign guy was terrible, terrible. He had a terrible campaign manager who's always on television, Stuart Stevens or something. He's always on television knocking everybody. The guy ran one of the worst campaigns in the history of modern politics. And Mitt ran, probably it was the worst run that most people have seen, because most people thought that the Republican candidate would win. So when Mitt started raising his head a few months ago, I was very strong. I said, Mitt Romney should not run. He's a choke artist. And I said it very strongly. I wanted to keep him in. And then Jeb Bush actually convinced Mitt not to run. Can you imagine? Jeb sold him. Jeb, he's a good salesman. See, now that he's out, I'll say Jeb's a good salesman, right? He's a high-energy salesman. But Mitt was afraid of Jeb, because he was afraid that Jeb would get the money and Jeb would get the whatever. And, you know, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of Jeb, I can tell you that. So what happened is Jeb Bush convinced Mitt not to run. Mitt was going to run. It was going to be a third attempt, the second one being one of the great catastrophes. The first one just didn't happen, so that's okay. But the second was a catastrophe. And what happened is he went to see Jeb, and Jeb had him convinced that he's going to run, he's got the money, he's this, and Mitt chickened out. But I'll tell you the real reason he chickened out. It wasn't Jeb. It was me. Because I said, he's a joke. If you remember, Mitt was all set to run. I know this from people that are close to him. And I think he probably still has a desire, maybe at the convention, to try and get some kind of a thing. Hillary Clinton will destroy him in the election. Assuming she's allowed to run, assuming she's not arrested for the email situation, which is so terrible. Which is so terrible. I mean, so terrible. But let's assume that the Democrats are going to protect her. Let's assume that I will be running against Hillary, and I really want to. I would love to run against Hillary. And by the way, we have numerous polls that show me beating her easily, and I haven't even started on her yet, other than 4 weeks ago I did. Remember? She called me sexist, and I hit her with the husband, and that was the last time I ever heard the word sexist. That was it. No, that was it. They had a rough weekend. That was a rough weekend. Bill was not happy. I guarantee you, he said, don't you ever say that to him again. Say it to somebody else, but not to Trump. That was a rough, rough weekend they had. But Mitt was going to run, as sure as you're standing here. I'm sorry we didn't get you to see, it's too many people. But he was going to run, and I was very, very angry that he was going to run. I didn't even know I was going to be doing this, but I felt I wanted to. You know, NBC came to me. They wanted to extend The Apprentice for 2 seasons, 28 episodes. Steve Burke of Comcast, great guy, came up to my office with the people at NBC. Please, Donald, we'd like you to run. We'd like you to, not run. We'd like you to run in The Apprentice, do The Apprentice. The ratings after 14 seasons were still fantastic. They were still great. And I said, Steve, I think I'm going to run for president. No, you're not. No, I think I'm going to run for president. They didn't want me to. They wanted me to because the show does great. And ultimately, I decided to run, and you're not allowed by law, with equal time laws, you're not allowed to do both. And we chose Arnold Schwarzenegger. Let's see, how will Arnold do, by the way? Does anybody know? Who would be better, Arnold or Trump? Ready? Arnold? Trump. Well, we're going to find out if Arnold is quick, because if he's not quick, he's not going to look good. When you have Omarosa and all the other ones coming at you, you got to be quick, you got to be smart. We'll find out. We're going to learn a lot about Arnold, but I hope he does well. I hope Arnold does really well. But I was going to do that, and they actually renewed the show with me in the upfronts, and I just said I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And I gave up a lot of deals. I gave up a lot of things. To do this takes a lot of effort. A lot of time. Oh, those are the people trying to get in. Can you believe it? Yep. Okay, how about everybody now clearing out? We'll let a new group in. Is that okay? No? So anyway, when I heard Mitt was going to run, a little before this period of time, I was very tough. I said, he can't run, he can't run. He was going to run. He can't run. Then I started saying, look, we got to keep him out because he's going to lose. He's a choke artist. He's an absolute, and I started hitting him so hard. In fact, people say, why'd you hit him so hard? Because we cannot take another loss. We can't take another loss. And Mitt is indeed a choke artist. He choked, and he choked like I've never seen anyone choked, other than Rubio when Chris Christie was grilling him. That was one of the great chokes. Oh, no. Rubio of Florida, that was one of the great chokes I've ever seen. He was standing there shaking, sweating. I was getting ready. I'm standing here like this. He's right over here. I'm getting ready to grab him because I thought he was going down. I'm telling you. But Mitt did a big, big choke, and we had to keep him out. So look, a couple of things I heard he said. First of all, he doesn't mention the fact that I built a city on the west side of Manhattan, that I built buildings all over Manhattan. He didn't mention into this that he was talking about a beef, and he talked about a water company, which, by the way, I still have. I supply all my clubs with the water. Numerous of those things I have, the magazine, other things. Get him out of here. Get him out. Get him out. Hey, by the way, speaking of Mexico, I won the Hispanic vote by far in Nevada, right? We won the Hispanic vote in Nevada in the polls we won Nevada, we won South Carolina, we won New Hampshire. Then we had the big Tuesday where we won a tremendous number. And I have to tell you this. So ultimately, Mitt chickened out. And now he's saying, probably sees Hillary's very weak, and now he said, "Oh, I wish I went. I wish I tried it." But ultimately, he didn't, because he would have gotten beaten very badly. But I'll tell you what, a couple of things were mentioned that we have to discuss. First of all, when he talks about me, I wrote just a couple of them down. When he talks about me, they don't want to talk about 92-story buildings all over the place. They don't want to talk about the Bank of America building in San Francisco, 1290 Avenue of the Americas. They don't want to talk about the West Side Railroad Yards, where I built a city on the west side of Manhattan, a tremendous city on the west side of Manhattan. They don't want to talk about 40 Wall Street and all the buildings. They want to talk about water, which I still have. I supply all my clubs. I have a water company. They want to talk about a magazine, and I have a magazine. It goes to all my clubs. They do a little tiny thing, wherever you can find. By the way, a school, little deal, but very, I loved it when it was there. Trump, they call it Trump University, Trump Initiative. But I will tell you, just so you understand on the school had 98% approval rating. But you had an attorney that felt, oh, maybe I can sue Trump and get something. The school had a 98%. In other words, 98% of the people that took the courses, we signed report cards. That's why you can't settle a case like that. You put somebody up in the stand. Did you write this? The most beautiful thing. They did a commercial. They took it down where two people were going and saying negative, and then we showed them the statement that they wrote. They had to take the commercial down because 98% of the people that took the courses said really wonderful things about it. The other thing's got an A from the Better Business Bureau. So I say, how do I settle a case like this? A B plus would be okay too. B plus would be okay, but we did better than a B plus. So I can't, and here's one thing I say about business. I watch these bankers, and they get millions of dollars a year, $40, $50 million. Frankly, it's ridiculous. And then they'll settle with the government if they're sued by the government for $2 billion, $3 billion, $5 billion, $12 billion. And I say to them, why don't you fight it? They said, well, it's the government. We don't want to fight. Well, I say, you got to fight it, because if you don't fight it, everyone's going to sue you. And that's what happens. You ever see it? They settle for $2 billion. The next week, they get sued again. You got to fight these things out. You have to do things. You have to do what's right. So with university, I knew I could get some bad publicity on it, but I have to do what's right. Do we agree with that, by the way? So it's a very small case. It's a civil case. It's not a big deal. And I'm going to win it in court. And it'll cost me more money to win it in court than I could settle for, in my opinion. But I'm going to win it in court. And I said, oh, this is lousy timing, because it's too bad it wasn't a little bit later, because I happened to be running for president. But I have other suits, too. Any businessman or businesswoman has lawsuits. People sue to get their money back. They sue for this. They sue for that. They sue for a million different reasons. So just so you understand, 98% approval rating, an A from the Better Business Bureau. We're going to win the case. Mark it down. We're going to win the case. It'll be forever, because it takes forever. But that's the way it is. I don't like to settle cases. I don't like to do it, because once you settle cases, what happens is everybody says he's a settler. Let's sue. That's not me. A lot of people don't sue me because they say it's too hard. So one of the things that Mitt brought up, which I think is so serious, he said about trade. We have to keep trade. Nobody knows more about trade than me. I mean, I made so much more money than Mitt. You know, I have a store that's worth more money than Mitt. It's a store. And actually, it was funny, because I made that statement jokingly when I was in Iowa. And the Des Moines Register, a paper that's actually a terrible paper, if you want to know the truth, but they called up, they said, oh, that's a terrible statement. That's a terrible statement for you to make that statement about. And the people put me on. I said, what are you saying? They said, you said you have a store that's worth more than Mitt. So let's say Mitt's worth $150 or $200 million. I said, what's he worth? They said, $150 million. I said, yeah, the store's worth much more than him. It's on Fifth Avenue, you know, it's Gucci, the Gucci store. So I said, yeah, it's worth much more. We don't believe a store is worth $150 million. I said, well, go ahead, go get a couple of. They actually went out, got 3 appraisers, and they said, you know what, that store is worth from $400 million to $1 billion too. And by the way, this isn't me talking. You can go check your local Des Moines Register if it's still open. I'm not sure it's still open. But anyway, but I built an amazing company. And you know, one of the reasons you know it's amazing, the hottest development site, probably in the history of the General Services Administration, the GSA, that's the government service, is the old post office site. That's where the post office is built in Washington, D.C., an entire block fronting on Pennsylvania Avenue. In other words, if I don't get there through the White House, I'm getting there anyway. Okay, folks?
Okay, so the full Donald Trump speech is being posted at Alternate Mox News YouTube page. You can find a clickable link in the text body of this video. Right below the video, there's a little box that says show more, and there's a clickable link to the Alternate Mox News YouTube page that has this complete Donald Trump speech posted. It's pretty much the same old speech except for the Mitt Romney part. So I separated out the Mitt Romney part and put it here because I like the part about him telling Mitt Romney to get on his knees, and he would have. I wonder what he's implying there. But anyways, I just want to let you know, if you want to see the full speech, it's over at an Alternate Mox News YouTube page. You can find it in the text body, a clickable link in the text body of this video. Please subscribe to that page also. Sorry, I'm having you spread out across all these Mox News YouTube pages, but YouTube is being dickish when it comes to copyright. and stupid and moronic. So, and there's not a lot I can do about it. Even though they're in the wrong. But if you'd like to help Mox News stay strong, there's also a clickable link to make a quick donation to Mox News. If you want to buy me lunch or something, that would be really nice. I really like lunch.